Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally start to move on, when you stop caring, stop chasing, and begin healing, that's exactly when he suddenly shows up again? Out of nowhere, there's a text, a call, a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" Don't be surprised. I told you this would happen, because this isn't just about him, it's about you. It's about the quiet magnetic power you awaken the moment you choose yourself. And that kind of energy, it pulls people back in. But just because he comes back doesn't mean you should. And that's what we need to talk about, why this happens, and what you absolutely must remember when it does. See, a man doesn't usually recognize what he had until it's gone. That isn't just some worn-out saying. It's rooted in how our brains work. Human psychology is wired to respond more strongly to absence than to presence. When you're constantly available, always responding quickly, initiating conversations, offering emotional support, trying to fix what's broken, your presence starts to blend into the background. You become expected, assumed, a constant. And when something is constant, it begins to feel ordinary, predictable. He doesn't stop valuing you because you're not good enough. He stops seeing your value clearly because consistency breeds complacency. And it's not always about malice or manipulation. It's about how we're wired. Our brains are programmed to react to disruption, not stability. So the moment you take a step back, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect, something begins to shift. You stop overextending yourself. You stop checking in. You stop fighting for someone who clearly isn't fighting with you. And what happens? There's silence. There's space. There's stillness. And for someone like you, someone who has always been the one to hold it all together, that stillness can feel unnerving at first. You've spent so long trying to keep the conversation alive, trying to understand, trying to be patient. But now something has changed. You're no longer participating in the same dynamic. You've reclaimed your peace. You've protected your energy. And that decision, that boundary, that's powerful. Because here's what most people miss. The mind notices what's missing far more than what's always present. That's why we don't think much of a healthy body until we're in pain. We don't appreciate the light until it's gone. And now you've become that absence. You've become the empty space in his life that wasn't there before. And that absence, it has a voice. It speaks. And it screams louder than any words you ever said. Suddenly, the same man who took hours to reply starts checking his phone. The one who said he needed space starts stalking your stories, scrolling through old pictures, reliving old memories. But it's not because he suddenly became a better person overnight. It's because the silence triggered a part of him that's uncomfortable with losing what he thought was guaranteed. He never really believed you'd walk away. He counted on you always being there. And now, that calm detachment, that peaceful energy you're radiating, it unsettles him. You're no longer reactive. You're not reaching out. You're not crying. You're not angry. You're just done. And that calmness, that silence, it becomes a mirror that reflects back the truth. Not the version he told himself, but the one that's been there all along. That he had someone who chose him again and again. That he was met with love, support, and presence, and didn't return it. And now that woman is gone. He may come back. In fact, he often will. But not always because he wants love again. Sometimes he returns because he can't tolerate the void. He misses being wanted. He misses the attention, the care, the emotional safety you gave him without asking for anything in return. Sometimes he just wants to see if he still has access to you. And that's why your response matters more than anything. This isn't about revenge or playing games. It's about clarity. You need to ask yourself, what is this about? Is it love or is it lack? Is it regret or is it ego? Because here's the truth. Your worth isn't defined by how hard you fight to keep someone in your life. It's shown by how boldly you walk away when your efforts are no longer being met. So when he comes back, don't let the timing fool you. Recognize your own growth. Your absence wasn't a tactic, it was a turning point. The moment you stopped focusing on him and started focusing on yourself, everything began to shift. And that shift, it's not just felt by you, it's felt by everyone around you, especially him. Growth is magnetic. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to post about it or explain it to anyone. People feel it. They see it in your energy, in the way you carry yourself. And when a man who once knew you sees you glowing, truly glowing from within, living your life, smiling effortlessly, no longer waiting for him to notice, he feels that shift. He's drawn back in, not because you tried to get his attention, but because you finally stopped needing it. That change is powerful. You moved from being emotionally wrapped up in his inconsistency to becoming fully invested in your own evolution. And that transition, that's what sets you apart. Because when you're in that waiting space, hoping, wondering why he hasn't texted, overanalyzing his every move, you drain yourself. Your energy centers on him. Your confidence dips. You question your worth. You replay every word, every silence, and you make his behavior mean something about you. But the moment you've had enough, when his silence, his mixed signals, and his lack of effort no longer feel like puzzles you need to solve, you reclaim that energy. You shift your focus. You start moving your body, not to impress him, but to respect yourself. You go to the gym to build strength. You read to expand your mind. You pour into your own growth because you finally realize that no one is coming to save you but you. And then something incredible happens. The version of you that used to obsess over every little thing is nowhere to be found. The overthinking, the emotional spirals, the desperate hope, they're gone. And what's left is a woman who knows her worth, who walks differently, who talks to herself with kindness, who handles stress with grace. Your transformation doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It speaks through presence, through peace, through power. And now, the man who once saw you as predictable begins to feel uncertain. He no longer sees the girl who would bend, who would chase, who would settle for crumbs. He sees a woman who's not changing for him, but who grew for herself. That evolution wasn't about him. It never was. It was about you reclaiming what was always yours, your identity, your dignity, your direction. And when your confidence becomes real, when it's not fueled by validation but grounded in truth, it radiates. You're no longer dressing for him. You're not checking your phone, hoping he noticed your story. You're not seeking anyone's approval. You're simply being. You're living in alignment with who you are. And that energy, that peace, that self-trust, it's magnetic. Even if he doesn't fully understand what changed, he senses it. He sees that you're no longer the woman who tolerated his bare minimum. You're not texting at midnight waiting for a reply. You're not decoding his social media posts. You've detached, not in anger, but in strength. And that scares him. Because he thought you'd wait. He thought your love would keep you stuck, that your patience was endless. He thought the door would always be open, but instead he comes back and finds it closed, not slammed, not locked, just quietly, firmly shut. And on the other side, a woman who isn't bitter, a woman who isn't playing games, a woman who simply outgrew the place she used to shrink herself to fit. Now he's the one thinking, he's the one watching, he's the one replaying old moments. The roles have reversed. He remembers the tears, the conversations you tried to have, the support you gave without asking for anything in return. And now he wonders how the same woman who once cried for him can now live so freely without him. That's what growth does. It flips the dynamic. He expected desperation. Instead, he finds indifference. He expected longing. Instead, he finds peace. And it shakes him because deep down, he knows this version of you, the healed, whole, grounded version, he no longer has access to her, and maybe he never really deserved to. He might come back, but now the choice is yours. You get to decide whether the woman you've become has any desire to return to a chapter she already closed. Because when a man walks away from a woman who gave him emotional safety, he doesn't always realize what he's actually leaving behind. He might think he's ending a relationship that no longer excites him or walking away from something that feels too comfortable, but in reality, he's letting go of something rare, emotional security, and that's not something you stumble into again. You were the one who listened without judgment, the one who allowed him to open up even when he didn't have the words. You were his peace in a world that constantly demanded him to be strong, to perform, to hide his softness. And because that kind of comfort doesn't shout or beg, he mistook it for something ordinary. He forgot how rare it was. He didn't have to fight for it. He didn't have to earn it. It was just there, steady, soft, unconditional. He got used to being seen, heard, forgiven. He got used to being emotionally held, possibly for the first time in his life. But then one day, it was gone. That comfort, that emotional safety, that deep, consistent presence disappeared, and he started feeling the void. Not because he couldn't find another woman, but because he couldn't find you. Because no one else loved him like you did, without agenda, without ego, without trying to control him. Maybe when he left, he thought freedom would feel like relief. Maybe he believed space would give him clarity. Maybe he convinced himself that someone else would offer more excitement or less pressure. But what he didn't expect was that emotional safety can't be replaced, that it doesn't show up in the form of charm or instant chemistry. It shows up through time, through trust, through presence. And he had that with you. He just didn't recognize it until he tried to find it elsewhere and failed. There's a huge difference between attraction and connection. Attraction is easy. It's based on surface level traits, looks, banter, excitement. But connection, real connection, that's built on how someone makes you feel about yourself. And you made him feel safe. You made him feel like he didn't have to wear a mask, like he could just be raw, unfiltered, flawed. That kind of space, it's unforgettable. It's irreplaceable. And no matter how far he goes, no matter how many people he meets, that memory comes back. Sooner or later, it always does. It shows up in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, during a long drive, when life feels heavy and he realizes there's no one to talk to like he talked to you. That's when the regret creeps in, not because he suddenly knows how to love better, but because he remembers how you loved. He might not have the words for it. He might just say, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about you." But what he's really missing is how you made him feel about himself, the way you noticed the parts of him no one else did, the way you showed up even when he didn't ask for it, even when he didn't know how to receive it. That's what he misses. That's why he reaches out, because one day he realizes that comfort like that doesn't come around twice, that the way you held space for him can't be duplicated. And it hits him that losing you wasn't just about losing a partner, it was about losing a sanctuary. But here's the truth. Just because he finally understands what he had doesn't mean he gets to have it again. You gave your love, your care, your emotional safety freely. And if he didn't protect it then, you're allowed to protect it now. Emotional safety is sacred. Not everyone deserves to experience it twice. Just because he remembers how good it felt doesn't mean you owe him that feeling again. There's a moment in every relationship when one person starts to assume the other will always be there. He thought he could drift in and out, pull away without warning, and still be welcomed like nothing changed. He thought you'd keep replying to the late-night messages, that you'd continue forgiving the silence, the mixed signals, the half-hearted effort. And for a long time, you did. Not because you were weak, but because you loved him. You saw what he could be. You saw potential. But love without reciprocity becomes emotional debt. You kept investing, and he kept withdrawing, and eventually, the account ran dry. When a woman finally gets tired, it doesn't happen with a loud goodbye. It happens quietly. It's a shift in how she gives, in how she speaks, in what she prioritizes. She no longer tries to explain herself. She doesn't plead. She doesn't chase understanding. She just lets go, and that silence carries more weight than any argument ever could. He thought your patience would last forever, that you'd always circle back. But now, he's met a version of you with boundaries, a version that no longer negotiates with disrespect. And that version is powerful. What men often misread as emotional dependence is really emotional loyalty. They assume that because you stayed through disappointment, you'll stay through anything. They see your grace and think it's permission. But grace isn't a green light for bad behavior. It's a reflection of your character. And when that grace is gone, when your boundaries finally step in, he realizes far too late that he went too far. The day you stop showing up is the day he realizes he was never promised another chance. At first, he might feel free, relieved even. No more pressure to change, no more accountability. But as time passes, that silence he once craved becomes deafening. The freedom he was so eager for begins to feel hollow. And suddenly, you start appearing in places he didn't expect. In a song, a scent, a shared memory. He wants to tell you something good that happened, or seek comfort when something bad does. But you're not there. You're not waiting. You're not checking in. You're living. And that's when the panic sets in. That's when the questions come. Did I make a mistake? Why isn't she reaching out? Is she over me? He always assumed you'd be around until you weren't. Now he's forced to sit with the weight of his choices, the calls he didn't return, the feelings he dismissed, the moments he took for granted, the love he pushed away because he didn't know how to hold it. And the worst part, no one did this to him. He did it to himself. This is the pattern so many women find themselves in, giving and giving until there's nothing left to give. Not because they stopped loving the other person, but because they finally started loving themselves more. That moment, it changes everything. That decision to choose yourself over confusion, over chaos, over crumbs, it's the beginning of healing. And now, while he's replaying the damage, trying to make sense of how it all slipped through his hands, you've already rebuilt yourself. Not into the same person, but someone new, someone stronger, someone who no longer needs closure to move on, who doesn't wait around for apologies that may never come. Because when a woman understands her worth, she doesn't chase the same love that made her question it. She walks away, and she never looks back. When a man comes back after hurting you, it's tempting to believe it's because he's changed. He doesn't necessarily miss the relationship. He misses the role he played in your world. He misses being the person who could trigger a reaction, who could count on your care no matter how badly he acted. But now you're not reacting. Now you've stopped spinning your world around him, and that unsettles him because the ego hates unpredictability. So instead of reflecting, instead of facing his part in the downfall, he tries to regain control. He re-enters your life just to see if he still can. And that's the moment your strength is tested, because it's easy to confuse regret with growth, easy to believe his words, easy to think he's come back because he's ready to love you the right way. But pause, look deeper. Has he taken accountability, or is he just trying to soothe his own guilt? Is he doing the work, or is he saying what he thinks you want to hear? Real growth doesn't beg for another chance. It respects your boundaries. Real growth shows up with changed behavior, not just sweet words. If he's coming back only to feel better about himself, to rewrite the story where he's not the villain, that's not love. That's ego preservation. Your peace is not a rehabilitation center for a wounded ego. You are not responsible for making him feel whole again, especially not the one who broke you. Choosing not to go back doesn't make you cold. It doesn't mean you're bitter. It means you're clear about what you deserve, clear about what love really looks like, because not everyone returns out of love. Some people come back because they lost control over you, and your job now is to know the difference. Once you know that, once you feel that deep in your soul, you will never again mistake a guilty comeback for a loving return. The reason he comes back often has nothing to do with love and everything to do with timing. Life has a way of humbling people. The same man who thought he could do better, who believed he had endless options, who treated you like you were replaceable, eventually reaches a moment when reality shatters the fantasy. He tries to move on. Maybe he meets someone new. Maybe he fills his days with distractions, convincing himself he's fine. But over time, it catches up. That excitement fades. The connection with someone else feels shallow. The validation isn't enough. And then it hits him. He had something real, and he let it go. Time doesn't lie. It's the ultimate truth teller. In the moment, he may have told himself you were too emotional, too intense, too complicated. But now, after facing people who don't look at him like you did, who don't understand him without words, who don't hold space for him like you did, he realizes you weren't too much. You were just more than he could handle. He thought you'd wait, that no matter how long it took, you'd still feel the same. But time didn't just change his perspective, it changed you. You're no longer the woman who settles. You're no longer the woman who waits by the phone. You've grown, you've healed, you've become someone who finally understands the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in the process. So when he returns, expecting the woman he left behind, he finds someone he doesn't recognize, someone grounded, someone glowing, someone who learned that love without consistency is just chaos in disguise. That hope isn't a strategy. That effort must go both ways, and that's when his confusion begins. He didn't expect you to evolve. He didn't expect your silence to speak louder than your love ever did. He remembers the version of you who would have dropped everything to answer his call, the one who would have melted at his apology, the one who would have rearranged her life just to keep him in it. But that version of you doesn't exist anymore, because she learned that love cannot be built on fantasy, potential, or emotional leftovers. Now he shows up with memories. Meanwhile, you're living in a new reality. He says things like, "I miss what we had," or "No one makes me feel the way you did." But you've learned the truth. Missing someone is not the same as being ready for them. Just because he remembers your light doesn't mean he knows how to protect it. He's not changed. He's nostalgic. There's a big difference. And while he may want to romanticize the past, you see it for what it was. A painful lesson, a chapter you outgrew. You're not looking for a comeback story. You're looking for consistency, maturity, accountability. You're not chasing attention. You're seeking alignment. And that shocks him more than anything, because he counted on you being the same. Now you meet his return not with softness, but with silence, not with emotion, but with clarity. Because when you've truly healed, a name that once broke you doesn't make your heart race anymore. It makes you grateful, grateful for how far you've come. He always comes back once you've moved on, once the fire in your chest no longer burns for him. That's when he realizes what he lost. But by then, you've already won. Not because he wants you again, but because you finally want yourself more. And that's the real victory. You're no longer the woman who begged to be seen, who accepted crumbs, who poured endlessly into a connection that drained her. You've evolved. You've found strength in your silence, peace in your distance, power in your self-respect. He comes back because he feels that shift. He senses that he no longer has a hold on you, that the emotional leash he thought you'd wear forever has snapped. Because when you've truly healed, you don't see him the same way anymore. You see reality. You no longer romanticize his potential. You no longer excuse what he did. And most importantly, you no longer feel responsible for his growth. That scares him more than anything. He thought your love would override your boundaries. He thought it would override your logic. Maybe it did once. But healing rewrites the story. Healing teaches you to choose peace over passion that left you in pieces. And when he comes back, it's not because he's changed. It's because you have. You've stopped reacting. You've stopped waiting. You've built a life so full of joy, purpose, and alignment that there's no space left for anything that feels like chaos. So when that "I miss you" text arrives, it holds no power, not because you're bitter, but because you're better. Better for yourself, better in your boundaries, better in your belief that love doesn't hurt like that. Now, when he comes back, it's not met with desperation. It's met with indifference. You don't need closure. You don't need validation. You don't even need an explanation, because your growth is the closure. Your peace is the victory. If this spoke to your heart, if you saw yourself in these words, don't just scroll past. Tap that like button to let your future self know you're ready to heal, grow, and never settle again. And if you're done with half love and bare minimum energy, hit subscribe, because here we're rewriting our worth one truth at a time.